So we're continuing on this journey we've been on the last several weeks to look at Jesus' teaching in that wonderful, extremely long Sermon on the Mount. I cannot even imagine how long this must have taken. But as we've been journeying the last few weeks, we've talked about it's what we are. We talked about being. Last week we talked about even more. So this week I think I have to make it absolutely clear to you. Everything we've been talking about comes down to one thing only. Your choice. I had the first reading done in Leviticus to remind us of all those rules and regulations which God set before the people of Israel. Those that we refer to as the Ten Commandments, but you heard a kind of an elongated version today from Leviticus where the writer goes on and on about what it really means. And when it comes right down to it, we don't have to do anything. Oh, come on, stay with me. We don't have to do anything. We choose what we do. Now you're saying, well, you know what? If I didn't have to, I wouldn't go to work. Well, you don't have to. You can choose not to. You can choose to look for another job. You can choose to stay in bed all day long. You can choose to call in sick. You can choose to just check out. Be in someplace else by yourself. We sometimes, I believe, give so much power to the world around us. I have to do this and I have to do that. No, we don't. You see, we have been given freedom. We have been liberated by Jesus hanging on that cross, liberated from death. We have been liberated by God, given free will from the very beginning of creation. We have been liberated so we can decide what we do. Now, with liberation, with choice, comes consequences and responsibilities. So now I'll just say a quick word to parents who know all about this. It works with animals too, by the way. You give your children the ability to choose. And you give your pets the ability to choose. And then, sometimes, when the choices aren't the best, we step in. Last night, our big boy, our puppy, he's over a year old now, and almost a year and a half, weighs 85 pounds, and he is all puppy. He's a Doberman. So last night, Elizabeth found this wonderful stuffed toy on sale, left over from Valentine's Day, pink, cute, soft. So we gave it to him. He was so excited. I mean, he just saw it and he sat like, is that for me? Is that for me? Is that for me? And then I let him come and take it, and he just looked. And then it's like, where can I go? Because someone surely will take this one thing from me. And so he walked around a little bit, then he went and got one of the crates, and he was in there with his baby. And Elizabeth says to him, if you tear it up, you won't have it anymore. Because he, for some reason, chooses to tear up everything. After the stuffing inside, the stuffing flies. So last night, this was different. This was very, very soft. And so he went in his cage, and after a while, he fell asleep with his head right next. I know. It was so sweet. Elizabeth tried to take a picture. And then, because she disturbed him then, and she touched it, when she walked away, he took it and put it further back in the cage and then kind of guarded around it. So often we tell people we have a choice, but then I wonder how hard it is to follow through with the consequences. All too often, I believe, we help people get out of stuff that they got themselves into, that maybe they need to be in, so they can learn the lesson about getting themselves into that. I know, parents, you've done it, haven't you? You don't have to, okay, I hear from back here, from the parent of boys. You should have known better. Anyway, Sometimes we do step in to intercede, but it doesn't allow a person to know the consequences of choices. I look at young people today and I see the kinds of things that are happening, and actually it's not always young people, and I wonder, how do you rationalize in your own mind doing the same things over and over again, having the same things happen, and not realize that what needs to change is your choice about the things that you're doing. So, as Jesus is delivering these words, he refers back and again uses the same kind of thing that he was using in our reading last week when he says, "You've heard it said, but I say to you." Now, reading this stuff, okay. Last week I warned you about becoming a Christian. I said it wasn't easy. Maybe you really wanted to think about it. So now I'm going to warn you about something that you probably didn't get a say about. At least not if you're from a background like mine. Your baptism. How many people got to choose their baptism? Raise your hands. Whoa, that must be very cool. See, I was a little tiny baby. Nobody asked me. If they would, I'm not sure what I would have said because I wasn't speaking yet. I was very young, and my parents took me up with my godfather, those are my aunt and uncle. And they all promised wonderful things. I didn't promise a thing. I'm just going to tell you, I didn't promise. They promised for me. But even without my permission, in baptism I became a new creation. Now, some of you that were baptized when you were older, or even maybe as adults, you became a new creation. You became a new creation in Jesus Christ. That's what happened. There was a transformation, even on little tiny me, that put me safely in the arms of God. See, my parents promised that I would be brought up in the church. So they made me go every single Sunday, even when I didn't want to. That was my mother. And even if I had not gone, it did not change what happened to me in baptism. I became a new creation. So what happens when you become a new creation? What happens when you start choosing? Choosing grace and mercy and justice and love in your life. Choosing God, hear me, God over things in the world. Too many of us believe that to live the kind of life that Jesus wants us to live, that we can just change a couple of things. You know, we can come to church. Does that count? Coming to church? Yeah. We can give, support the church financially. Does that count? Yeah. Maybe we can encourage our families to come to church. Does that count? Yeah. So we think, we can do a couple things, and maybe we promise to be better drivers and not talk to the people in the other cars, even though they cannot hear us. God hears us. Maybe we promise to not use bad language around certain people. Maybe we promise to do one or two or three things differently. But it's not about that. It's not about one or two things. It's about everything. Every single thing in our lives. Next Sunday we celebrate the transfiguration of Jesus. And I want to challenge us that we need to choose to be transformed ourselves. We need to make that choice. It's really hard because without making profound changes in our life, without choosing to follow God, we are not doing the work that God has called us to do. Now, you need to understand, we need to understand, that it is about us. Often people tell you it's not about you. It's about you. It's about what you choose to do. You can choose to be the person who loves. You can choose life, or you can choose death. You can choose to be the person that judges, that holds grudges, that refuses to forgive, or you can choose to be the person that forgives everything. Jesus' words in the gospel today, oh my gosh, what a challenge. Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. If you love those who love you, what reward is it? I mean, it's expected, isn't it? But loving your enemies? No, not just not hating them. It's a difference. Not just avoiding them. Is that a good one? I mean, if you have someone you really don't like, can you avoid them and then you have to deal with it, right? No, it's not about that. That's not what Jesus is saying. You have to choose to love your enemies. You have to choose to pray for them. And you cannot pray, God, please, give them what they deserve. That does not count. That does not count. You've heard me say it before. God, I just pray they get what they deserve and I can watch. But no, that's not how it's supposed to be. And Jesus goes on to say, the very last verse, I think that's has been the hardest for me. Be perfect, therefore, as God is perfect. So I did a little research, because sometimes research helps me, sometimes it does not. The perfectness that we are called to be is to try 100% to do what God wants us to do. Now, being perfect doesn't mean we succeed 100% of the time. But God knows if we try. God knows if we try. Jesus was talking to a very, very different group of people. Most of the people gathered on the side of the mountain to listen to Jesus were Jews. And they were very, very familiar with the commandments. They were very, very familiar with all the things they could not do. They were familiar with the fact that they should do some things. Love God. Honor their parents. But mostly it was about not doing bad things. You shall not kill. You shall not steal. You shall not commit adultery. Remember last week Jesus went on in the Sermon on the Mount about, if you lust after someone in your heart, you've already committed adultery. Oh my gosh. Some of us may be in trouble. I watched Beowulf last night. It's a wonderful, this is Ray Walston's version of Beowulf. And some of you may remember who the person is that plays the monster, the mother of Grendel. I won't go into that. Talking about lust. Those of you that know. So it's not about us not doing the bad things. It's not about us resisting evil. But it is about choosing compassionate living. We have a whole process that's happened here in St. Augustine where we've been designated a compassionate city, a city of compassion. Okay? The group that did this, Elizabeth and I had the privilege of going and meeting with them once, and they've worked very hard to get all people on board so that this, St. Augustine, is a city of compassion. But I don't know if we are. I can't look around at how the homeless are treated in St. Augustine. I can't look around at those who are hungry in St. Augustine. I mean, yes, we're doing lots of stuff. But know this. In order to be designated a city of compassion, that means all of us, hear me, all of us need to be compassionate in everything we do. Now here's the truth. Most of us aren't. We're just not compassionate. Think about it. You see something going on, you drive by something on the road. You ever see anybody holding up those signs? I'm hungry. Okay? You see it, and how many of us make the excuse. Well, I'm on my way to church. I cannot possibly stop and help somebody. You have my permission to be late. Because if there's one thing we should be doing on the way to church and the way from church and every time is stopping to help. I like what Jesus says here. I like what Jesus says. If you are asked to go 1 mile, go the second mile. If someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other. If someone wants to sue you and take your coat, give them your cloak as well. This meant something to the people that were gathered with him that day. You see, the Roman government, Roman citizens, Roman soldiers, could and did require people to carry their burdens, their packages, whatever they happened to have. They could walk right up to somebody and say, "Carry this." You were required by law to carry it for a mile. Someone reminded me at Bible study, they shall remain nameless, that I said, wonder how they knew it was a mile. Well, if you were on one of the main roads, Romans built beautiful roads, there were mile markers. So you knew when your mile was up. Jesus said, walk another mile. You were required, if someone struck you on the cheek, to take it, if they were Roman, or if there was someone above you in station. You could not retaliate. But they could only strike you once. Only strike you on the right cheek. That meant they were superior to you. You had to be subservient to them. But Jesus says, turn the other cheek. That's the cheek they weren't allowed to strike. That's the cheek that really meant a more severe reprimand. Jesus said, give them that one too. Go ahead, let them hit you again. Oh my gosh. How do you feel about that? Someone walks up to hit you. Can I try? No, I'm not trying. How would you feel? Someone came up and shoved you, knocked you. What would our response be? Think about it. How many people are ready? Okay? How many people retaliate? This is how violence is perpetrated. This is how wars start. By someone not being willing to turn the other cheek. Oh, but wait a minute, Pastor. What about justice? What about justice? Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said it best. He did peaceful protest, and he was very adamant about it. During February, many of us had Martin Luther King birthday off, and you saw lots of things going on. And the more I saw that, the more I remembered what he talked about. And I wonder how he'd feel today, looking around and seeing the violence perpetrated in his name. Violence perpetrated by the community that he wanted so much to get rid of the violence, to live in love. You see, it is a choice we make to perpetrate violence. It is a choice we make to perpetrate injustice. And you don't succeed in justice work by escalating violence. So you see someone that's unjust, and what do? Slap them? Well, maybe they'll turn the other cheek, maybe they won't. But we have to choose to work for justice with love. Oh, I know. I'm standing up here saying it, and as I hear my words, I go, I cannot do all of this. I cannot forgive everyone. I cannot turn the other cheek. I cannot treat every single person as a person I love and care about. I cannot pray for my enemy. Sometimes it's hard because I'm human just like you. I get angry. People hurt me. I don't want anything to do with them. So I just make it a point not to go anywhere near them again. Ever do that? You know, I don't want to retaliate, but I don't want to have anything to do with them either. The point being, Jesus is calling us to make hard choices. No choice that Jesus is talking about today in that sermon is easy. Not one of them. The things that Jesus said, it's just, to me, it's kind of mind-boggling that he would address this stuff to a group of people who were, by most standards, the poor. There weren't Pharisees and publicans Pharisees and Sadducees sitting out there on the hill. The high priest wasn't sitting there listening. The Romans who owned property weren't sitting there. It was the poor that were sitting there. The poor that Jesus was saying, if anyone begs from you, do not refuse them. Oh my goodness. Beg from us? They must have been thinking. We have nothing to give. And you're telling us if someone asks us for something, we have to give it. We're barely getting by. Jesus, how are we going to do this? It's not easy. It's not easy. Now, here's the very last thing I want to talk about today. Blame. Blame. Come on. Some people may call it by other names, but here's what it's about. It's about blaming somebody else for what's going on in your life. Oh, if I wasn't raised like that, I wouldn't be like this. Some of our parents are turning over in their graves right now going, I did not raise you like that. Blaming people for everything that goes wrong in our lives. I know you've heard it. I know I've heard it. I know I've said it. It's just this is the worst one for me. Me personally. It's just the way it is. Oh my goodness. It's just the way it is. We're blaming the world now. We're not even blaming a person. It's just the way it is. Just the way it is. We have to choose not to blame. We have to choose to take full responsibility for our lives and our decisions. We have to choose to live love, not fear, because fear is where blame comes from. You know, I've been watching the Olympics, and quite frankly, some of the stuff I still don't understand. Curling is fascinating, but okay. We're watching the skating pursuit. Is that what they call it? The pursuit. But they're pursuing themselves. They're not pursuing anybody else, but they're pursuing their own team. And when I look at that, I go, some of the stuff, the giant slalom, that is scary. Have you looked at that mountain? It literally comes almost straight down, and now they're saying it's icy, and I watch people flipping out, going on the sides. Watch one person flip out, their ski came off, they turned over 3 times, but they got up. I thought to myself, you know what? If you let fear in your life, you will never be able to compete in the Olympics. Think about it. There's plenty of stuff to be afraid of, maybe not curling. Unless someone gets really mad and picks up that stone. I don't know. But fear can paralyze us. It can stop us from doing the things we want to do, the things we choose to do. But fear is right there. That doesn't mean we shouldn't take chances unnecessarily either, but when we allow fear to rule our lives, we're not trusting God. Okay, hear this. If we allow fear to rule our lives, we are not trusting God at all. So how many of us are filled with fear? Fear about doing something because of what others might say. Fear about associating with somebody because of how people will think about us. Fear of speaking out when we see the injustice. Fear about talking, about loving rather than hating, and forgiving rather than holding grudges. I think it all comes down to fear personally. That is my opinion. That when we do things that we know God doesn't want us to do, we have to be doing it for a reason, don't we? When we choose not to follow God and God's word, we're doing it for a reason. Do you think we're doing it because, oh my goodness, I don't want to follow God today? Do you think we're choosing to go, oh, well, I'm sorry, God wants me to do this, but I'm not going to because I'm not following God today. I'm choosing to do this even though I know it's not God's way because today I'm not choosing God. I don't believe any of that. I believe we choose God all the time. But when we don't act on the choice we know we should be making, it's because of fear of something in our lives. Stop and think about it. Every single time we do something we know is not God's way, when we know it's not God's choice for us, we're doing it for a reason. I wonder how many of us think about that. Think about what the reason might be. Why aren't I doing this? Why am I not speaking out? Why won't I get involved in justice work? Fear. Fear. For those who've gone through CLM, one of the things that we're invited to do in that course, Creating a Life That Matters, by the way, is to find our passion. It's interesting because it may not be what you think it should be. But when you find your passion, that's when, at least in that one area of your life, you have a little extra courage to put the fear aside and to follow your passion. I didn't know what Carla was going to say today. But I'm telling you that she had to overcome fear to take the step. Let me tell you some of the things that she didn't say that may have been in her head. I know too much, so I'll try not to say those things. Anyway, when someone chooses at a point in their life to change their career entirely, it's because they've overcome fear. When they choose to put themselves out there, to be criticized, to be taken advantage of, when you choose that, you choose over fear. When you choose to make a step that's going to cost you money, money that maybe you don't even have, you have overcome that fear. And you heard what she said. She took the step, and God provided. See, that's what it's about choosing to take the step and trusting that God will provide. I hope today that we will choose. Choose to follow God. Choose to do what God is calling us to do. Today, for some of us, many, many years after our baptism, today I would like us to choose to be that new creation that we were baptized into. Please pray with me. God, we come to you today, first admitting we don't always make the best choices. But today we're going to think a little more. We're going to be a little braver. We're going to push the fear aside. We're going to love. And we're going to trust. Love and trust you. Love and trust each other. Today, empower us to be truly your new creation. Empower us to make the choices you would have us make. Empower us today to be your disciples. Amen. Amen.